I'll give you two bodies and a name. And if you want the rest of the story, and I can give you one of the murder weapons. And the rest of the story, like, you know, everything that happened.
Israel Keyes flies to Chicago. His plans were to visit some family members in Indiana, go fishing, and check out property he owned, then drives to Vermont.
On June 7th, 2011, Israel Keyes checked into the Handy Suites Hotel in Essex, Vermont. The next night, he went out looking for his victim.
He found a parking lot near a hotel where he was staying, and he saw what he thought was a secluded bush area. He hid in that area, and he was going to wait for somebody to come up in their vehicle, and then he would take that person.
Keyes was hidden in the dark, watching the car park.
He told us that a person drove in, parked where he had hoped somebody would park. It was a male.
But that person managed to quickly get out of the car and run into the apartment complex before Keyes could react. And so that person, they got away without knowing how close they had been to becoming one of Keyes' victims.
Israel was very restless because he was feeling the need to take somebody. So he went out for a walk in the neighborhood near the hotel. And that's when he saw the house that the Curriers lived in.
He knew he wanted a house that had an attached garage that would make it easier to enter unseen. He knew he wanted to find a house that didn't look like there were children living there.
He was looking very carefully for the lack of any pets, especially a yappy dog, and the Curriers did not have a dog. It was more about the house than it was about the Curriers.
After I found that house and decided that it was probably just a couple, I think I even had it pegged down just from looking at the outside that it was probably an older couple.
And so he watched and waited at night.
He cuts their phone lines.
And then he entered the house through the garage.
Grabs a crowbar from the garage and gets into the house and fast, busting the glass window.
He had a headlamp on so he could see, and he came in a blitz-style attack, he called it. He rushed in with a gun and surprised the Curriers who were sleeping in their bed.
It was like a blitz attack. You just make sure they know right away who's in charge and immediately tie them up, tell them what the rules are, that there's no talking unless I talk to them. They don't move unless I tell them to move.
He said the Curriers were just waking up, kind of didn't know what was going on quite yet, and that's how he was able to overwhelm them. And he had them turn over on their stomachs, and he bound them with zip ties immediately. They didn't have a chance to fight or run.
Israel Keyes interrogates the couple, finding items in their home.
I think that part of what he got off on was dragging it out. So, to get into the bedroom and, announce his presence and terrify them and do whatever he planned to do.
Keyes forced them into their own car and then drove off with them and took them to an abandoned farmhouse located a few miles away.
They were wondering what was going on, so I don't know. I guess I just told them a story that I thought was somewhat believable so they wouldn't freak out on the way out there. Told them I was taking them to a drop house, and there were other people that were going to meet us there, and they were convinced that I had the wrong people, and, that they didn't. I think they thought it was a case of mistaken identity.
He took Bill Currier into the house first. He took him down into the basement and tied him up down in the basement of this abandoned farmhouse. Then he went back to the car in the driveway to get Lorraine, and as he walked back, he saw Lorraine running away towards the road.
She was almost to the road when I came out of the basement, and she saw me come out. She started running, and I tackled her on the lawn, and I roughed her up a little bit and tied her back up and took her upstairs.
While Israel was upstairs assaulting Mrs. Currier, Bill Currier was downstairs
Yelling and screaming, "Where's my wife? Where's my wife?" So he had to go leave Lorraine again and go down back into the basement where Bill was.
Mr. Currier had gotten off the stool and a struggle ensued.
He's like, "Just let us go. I know you're in too deep, but we haven't really seen you. You can still walk away." And I just kind of laughed at him. I was like, I don't know if I actually said anything, but in my head I was like, you don't even know how much planning I put into this, and just walk away.
He told us that Mr. Currier wasn't cooperating with his plan. He didn't tell us what his plan was, but he did say he had plans for both of them.
Bill had become so belligerent at this point and was fighting back.
He realized that things had gone to a certain point where he had to take a different tactic with me and dealing with me.
Keys had to resort to using his gun, which he had not planned on doing. He didn't want to do.
So then when things got physical, that pissed me off.
Israel then shot him multiple times.
After Bill was dead, Keys went back upstairs and raped Lorraine and strangled her to death.
Israel Keys knew what he was doing. Killed them in that house. Raped Lorraine in that house. Kidnapped my brother and handcuffed him in that house. That man deserved to rot in prison.
To get rid of the bodies, Keys pours Drano on them, put them each in a garbage bag, and shoves the bodies into a corner of the basement of that abandoned farmhouse.
The plan was that night to burn the house, but by the time I was done, it was already getting light. It was like 6 or 7 a.m., so I didn't want to start a big fire. So I just figured if they were found, there wasn't enough evidence there to tie me to it.
When he told us that he was going to give us the 2 more bodies and a name, he gave us the name Curriers, and he asked for a computer. And he went to Google Maps, and he put the cursor on the house where he said that the bodies could be found in the corner of the basement. And so law enforcement was sent out to that location. It was an abandoned farmhouse kind of out in the country. Unfortunately, that house had been destroyed and been taken down, and the remnants of the house had been hauled to a dump site that was the size of several football fields, up to 12 feet deep.
Vermont authorities tried desperately to find their bodies, searching for 11 weeks.
Told you yesterday an announcement would come today, and now it's official. The dig at the Coventry landfill is over. The bodies of Bill and Lorraine Currier were not recovered.
To this day, Bill and Lorraine Currier are listed as missing persons, even though we know that they are dead.
I will never feel like there's closure until their bodies are found. And I don't think you'll ever find them. Ever.
Keys was very crafty in the way he committed his crimes. He was very elusive. Oftentimes he would fly into an airport in one state. He would rent a car there. He would then drive out of that state to another state, sometimes driving through multiple states before he would get to an area where he would actually commit a crime.
He would bury these caches or kill kits in areas and then travel back to those locations to commit the next crime.
And what these kill kits were is he would take a 5-gallon plastic bucket and he would put in it tools that he would need for future crimes.
He'd have rope, he'd have gloves, he'd have tape, he'd have zip ties. Some of them he would have a gun in there. They had all the tools that someone would need to abduct, restrain, and murder someone. He would do this years in advance, and he'd have them stashed all over the country.
I called up the Essex police and I said, did he bury one of those things here in Vermont? And the officer that I was speaking to said, yes, he did. We have evidence that he did.
In 2009, he had been on the East Coast, and he had buried a kill kit in Essex, Vermont area. And so he went back to that location to retrieve that kill cache, which had guns in it, and then killed the couriers.
He was very random about his victims. He wasn't looking for a particular age. He wasn't looking for a particular type of person. His victims were more of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. He purposely made it very difficult to track him down.
In my 27-year career in the FBI, I never saw anybody so meticulous in planning their crimes and getting away with it for so long.
He's made it very clear that in exchange for the information he was willing to give them, he wanted to make sure that, to the extent possible, his daughter could be protected from what he had done. He didn't want the details released to the public.
And so there's a cat and mouse game that sometimes you have to play. It's only wrong if it shuts down the person and he stops talking. But in this particular case, he was still providing useful information and accurate information.
Authorities believe Israel Keyes' first murder victim happened not long after he moved to Neah Bay, Washington in 2001. More victims soon follow.
We know that he disposed of bodies in Lake Crescent in Washington. The lake is in some parts 600 feet deep, and so we weren't able to find any victims.
He talked about Lake Crescent, and he talked about various other places in Washington where he could just make people disappear. And those were some of the same places that we drove by when I was working with him. So it was really, really jarring to find out about that, and that I had been alone with him for hours on end. In some places, he said he could hide a body where nobody would ever find it.
To protect their investigation, authorities keep Israel Keyes' name and crimes under wraps. That is until a Vermont TV station makes an announcement.
A Channel 3 News investigation over the last several months has led us to the identity of the man accused of killing the couriers.
Israel Keyes finds out his name is made public and stops talking.
I think he thought that he would take responsibility for it, and that would be it, and not the details wouldn't come out. And so once he found out that every single detail he told was going to eventually come out, he became much more reluctant to give us details.